What a troubled young man.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Huge thanks for tuning in and for subscribing. If you subscribed, if you haven't subscribed, please consider it. Like the video, make comments and all that sort of stuff, please, that'd be awesome. But yeah, this is a book review. It's a book I've just finished, and I wanted to say something about the book while it's fresh in my mind. It's a really interesting book, and there's lots to say about it. It's a significant book because it was heavily revered in its country of origin, Czechoslovakia, now obviously the Czech Republic, and there was a film made of it in 1966, shortly after the book was written, and the script was co-written by the author of the book. So the author did co-write the screenplay, which I think is really interesting, and the film is very similar to the book. So just a bit of background on me finding this and buying this. The film has actually got a big place in my heart from when I first started watching foreign language films. So when I was about 16, I made a deliberate attempt to watch films that like Channel 4 would bring up and allow me to watch, and I made a deliberate attempt to sort of discover the international films that were being presented to me, and I'd say probably Krzysztof Kieślowski's work had a big impact. So like Blind Chance was a really big film for me when I was at that age, and the short film about love, short film about killing, the Three Colours trilogy, all that sort of stuff. Really like Kieślowski, but Closely Observed Trains was a really big film for me as well. So the way that the main character in the I'll talk about the book in a lot more detail, but when I was really young and the main character was struggling with growing up, I kind of identified with that, I guess, although the setting of the book, and therefore the setting of the film, is clearly very specific, quite different to my experience, but I could relate to the main character at the time and the feelings of wanting to grow up, not feeling like they had grown up, and all that sort of stuff. But basically, Milos is the main character in the book Closely Watched Trains. So there was a British title of the film, Closely Observed Trains, but Closely Watched Trains is the book. And Milos is a 22-year-old, newly trained railway station guard, who is still kind of on some sort of like apprenticeship kind of training kind of situation with these guys that he's working with in this station in occupied Czechoslovakia in 1945. So this is set in 1945, before the war finishes, but there's a sense that the Germans know that they are losing, and it is definitely the end of the war, and you can kind of feel that. And there are references to specific things that happened in 1945 as well. And basically, the way that this book is written, it's a very short book, but it's a very powerful book, and it's very effective, and it's very impactful. And the way that the book is written, and kind of therefore the way the film runs, it's very surreal at points. As it's not surreal, that's not the right word. It's very absurd, I guess. And it seems like these little episodes that are in the book seem like quite random and seem like a bit of a stream of consciousness, but they all tie together really well. And part of that is because of the way it's written. It's got really nice prose in it, and I think it really pulls you in. The way that Bohumil Hrabal puts the text into the book, it's very beautifully written. It's got its moments of humour. It's kind of strange actually, because it's all sorts of things with this book. It's tragic, but it's also humorous. It's got this sense of the mundane and loads of detail into really small things that happen, while it's also really unpredictable and strange. It's really deeply emotional, but it also seems to be quite frivolous about some of the ways it describes some really serious things. So there's a whole mix of things. It's like a real anomaly, really, the way it's written, and it's quite unusual like that. And I think that's why it was so fascinating to read. So, the actual text itself goes well beyond the events and the development of the character, but there is really good characterization, and Milos is a very real 22-year-old that you can see as a real kind of fully fledged character. There is talking about how the beginning kind of reminded me a little bit of MASH in the way that they had this sort of banter between these characters that he was working with, and you had this sort of sexualized conversation and sort of the jokes about their antics that were based around their sort of sexual experience or their attitudes to women. So that kind of reminded me a little bit of the film MASH, not so much the series MASH, but that kind of level of banter. But then it gets really serious very quickly, kind of unexpectedly, and this is sort of arising from Milos's issue with premature ejaculation, which again kind of occurs quite suddenly in the story, and then it gets quite serious soon after that, and that gets developed further into another plot point, and the central to this book is Milos's coming of age and his reaction to this issue he's got of premature ejaculation, and once that gets resolved, then his reaction to that and the arrival of this train with Germans on it and his chance to be heroic essentially leads to a very emotional and powerful ending. So I'm not going to give you any spoilers about the way it ends, but that's quite an important aspect of the book. And it's quite strange, again, that the fact that the way, it's almost the matter-of-fact way it's written, is also mixed in with a very poetic way that you've got Milos's feelings towards these Germans, and one particular German, beautifully described in the text. Also, by the way, the fact that it's in first person, I think, is really powerful, and it's really good, really effective, and it really helps to give the reader the chance to really live through his shoes and kind of relate to what he's saying, because there's one moment where you could easily lose your empathy with him, but I think the fact it's in first person keeps that empathy going, because you've got that thought process going through the book, which I think is really important. So the first person aspect really does help the book. Also, the way that Milos is interacts with the other characters. So you've got his girlfriend, who is a conductor on the trains that go past, and sort of based at the station. And that relationship is really sweet. It's not actually a big part of the book, but it's definitely a major plot point, because it drives his motivation for a lot of things. But when she is there, it's kind of really nice the way they interact, and it's a very well-written relationship. Also, another relationship that's really well-written is his relationship with Hubitska, who's a station master that he really looks up to. And Hubitska's attitude to sex and to women is also an influence on him, and his sort of desire to grow up and become a man, and his ideas of masculinity and being a man, I think, come from Hubitska. So that's always an interesting thing in the book as well. So those characters, I think, really kind of pull the plot together. And there is a plot, because it seems quite random, but the plot is all based around the way that Milos is desire to become a man influences the events of the story. So I think it's a really interesting study on masculinity as well, because if I think about the Mishima book I read, which I can't remember the title, it's got a really long title about something like the sailor who lost its faith in the sea or something. That's a lot about masculinity as well, and I did talk about that on the channel about a year ago, and that's got a shocking ending, same as this has got a shocking ending, but the motivations for the characters are completely different, and their ideas about what makes a man and what makes a man masculine and what the purpose of life is, all those kind of things are completely different, which I think is really interesting. But yeah, I definitely recommend it, but it's definitely it'll probably surprise you, and I thought it's a really nice addition to some of the classics I've delved into. Also because it's got this sort of unrequited love in a way. I mean, it's not unrequited really because it's a successful relationship, but he's got this issue with premature ejaculation. So there's this issue with his relationship. Because that's in there, I love the fact that it's written so well, because recently I read a few months ago, I read another modern classic that was a Japanese classic about a geisha girl, and I found that really slow and it didn't draw me in, and I found it just really didn't have the charm that this one does, and the really interesting prose that this one has. So I was pleased that this was what it was, because I knew the film from when I was younger. I had forgotten a lot of the content of the film, but this brought a lot of it back. But it really did have an impact on me when I was a young teenager, and this definitely was impactful now as a novel. So it's a very short novel, but yeah, definitely recommend it anyway. So there we go. Closely Watched Trains by Bohumil Hrabal. Check it out. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Paint me a picture of what it's like to be you. Sit up on your high chair.